Hello everyone, Happy New Year. Welcome back to my channel. This is Titli and you're watching titlibee. I hope you all are doing great and I wish you all have a great year ahead, and I wish that all this pandemic finally go away this year. Take care of yourselves. So today's video is a recap of all the books that I have read in 2021. So I will be listing all the books that I have read and I will tell you like a one line or two line about those so that you can pick up this book if you want to read. And also I actually planned to read about 55 books, but something happened, like my exams were there, my parents were sick, they both of them got COVID, so I had to take care of them, etc, etc. So many things happened that my list dropped from 55 to 36. So this year I am just keeping my hopes down, so I have put my Goodreads challenge to 42. You can add me on your Goodreads if you have any reading challenge, or you can follow me there. I can follow you guys too, so that we can exchange our reading list. And it would be so great to have so many more friends to share bookish challenges and bookish ideas with. So yeah, sign me up for it. I will put my Goodreads link in the description box. So today's video is about all the books that I have read. So I have finally been able to read 36 books and I have made a list. Like, I cannot remember them, so I will be seeing this huge list for you guys. Made a list. It's a huge list, so I will be seeing this and telling you guys. And let's begin with this video. And before we get into the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Please help me to reach 600 subscribers. I am not even asking for 1000 right now. Just click there and let me reach 600 for now. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the books that I read last year, so it sounds very crazy to say last year, like it was just 2019, then 2020 came and now we are in 2022. It's surreal, like I still cannot believe whatever is happening and how fast time is, like, seems like it's going. So let's begin with the list. So the first book that I read, because I wanted to start the year with a classic, also I wanted to keep it short, The Importance of Being Earnest. I absolutely loved this book. It was so hilarious and it was a one day read. So if you are looking like to start this year and you want to read a good book but also a short book, perfect, go for this. Even though it's a classic, the English, I wouldn't say very hard to understand. I loved it and you can like finish it in a day, and if you're a slow reader, no problem, take a week. Reading at your pace, it's the ultimate joy of reading. So do not like go for other people's ambition to read in a day or anything. I would like to put that out there. The second book that I read, A Court of Silver Flames. So I love fantasy books. If you have been following me for long, then you know how much I love fantasy books, and one of the series is the Akota series. It's always on my top shelf. So I was anticipating this release and I read it as soon as it came out and it was perfect. So this is actually the continuation of the Akota. It's now has a new protagonist like Nesta and Cassian. So what was happening, I was not very fond of Nesta, so I wasn't sure if I would be liking this or not, but I did. Surprisingly, I did, and now I love Nesta. Like with Fairy is like that good girl or the proper protagonist, but Nesta is like much more realistic. Like you know why she is angry or what are the reasons of her actions. Like she is the protagonist. I like undoubtedly so much resonated with her. Yeah, not the powers, I do not have the powers, but otherwise I so much enjoyed reading this book. This is like a very thick book, about 700 plus pages, so I just breezed through them. It was chef kiss. The third book I read was Midnight Library. So this is like another book last year everyone was talking about, everyone was wanting to read this. So I had to get on that train and I read it. This was such a good book. So this book actually tells about the story of a girl who dies but is not really dead yet. She is on in that twilight zone right now, and this twilight zone is a library. So here all the chapters of her life is put there. Now she can go through all the what ifs and the birds and the regrets she had. Like she could choose something she left before, like an ex-boyfriend. Like what if she had continued with that person, or like an career option that she dropped somewhere, so she can pick up and see what could have happened. Like it's a good story. Like so much was like going on, and you can reflect in your life. Like all of us have some regrets in our life. What if we have done this, what if we have done that? So this book actually gives you a perfect glimpse of it, and why it's always good. Like where you are, what you have done, your choices have made you stood where you are, maybe for better or maybe for worse, but those were your choices. And even though our regrets are there, we are of our choices in the end. Yeah, I'm getting philosophical. The fourth book on my list is Finding Your Way. So this is actually a review copy that I received. It was a self-help book. It was short. It was nice. I wouldn't say it was like eye-opening like Ikigai, or eye-opening like what other book was good for me. Like I'm not someone who loves self-help book much, because I feel like they all are trying to sell the same formula in new permutation combination way. So but the only book that I absolutely love was Ikigai, and I suggest that book to everyone, so you can just go and read it. Next book on my list is The Heartstopper Volume 4. So Heartstopper is actually a graphic novel series. This is LGBTQ representation. Like I love this one because of its illustration, because how simple yet how impactful the storyline goes. Both the lead characters are so good, and the best thing is I heard, and there were rumors going on and news going on, that Netflix might adapt this whole book series. So it's so good, and I read this also like in a single day. As soon as I got my hands on this series, it was so. One of my favorite part of this Heartstopper volumes are that they talk about the mental health, the problems, or the difficulties that teenagers goes through. It brings out so well in such a simple way. Like you will understand, you will resonate. Like all of us in somewhere in life have gone through more or less something, like where we have our body image issues, or we have trust issues, or some family problems that going on, that we are not being able to go out and tell others. And these are like very suffocating thing that's often the teenagers go through, and that's what shapes them to be as adults. So this book actually talks about it so well, that I loved it. That's like one of the main reason this graphic novel, I guess, always going to be one of my favorite. And I'm someone who is from the psychology field, so this books always appeals me in that way, because I love the representation is not so overwhelming, but it's in a casual way, so you can relate to it, not on your face, but you know why the story is going in that way, or what are the problem the characters are going through. So it's really good, and we need more representation. The House in the Cerulean Sea is another novel. This is also a fantasy novel, and this one is something with new concept. So there's this society where the magical and the gifted children are taken away from the family and are put into orphanages, and government look after these orphanages, and they would go and check whether these magically gifted children are behaving well, or they are getting any proper recognition there, or they are having proper life in those homes. But actually government what tries to do, that they would send their representative and look it in a way so that they can write up a complaint against a home and take those children into some kind of home, like juvenile home kind of situation. So this our main protagonist, who was sent to look after, he goes and finds out the place he is actually going is in a remote island by the Cerulean Sea, and the special member of this particular home is the son of Satan himself. So this was such a fun story, loved it. Next book on my list is the book that I was deeply devastated to read, and I think this is a book that I would never read again. It has scarred me, it has scarred my memories, and that is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. The book is cursed. I mean, I am a Potterhead. Like I deeply love Harry Potter and the whole universe in it, but this book has messed me up. Like nowadays I'm like, Delphi, Delphi. Then I'm like, oh, Delphi is a character of that book, and that is not an original Harry Potter character. Like it has messed me up so bad, and the book was so bad. So much plot holes I felt like, and I know this is not written by J.K. Rowling herself. It is actually made for the drama, but this is something I would suggest if you are going to read it. Don't go and read it keeping in mind it is a continuation of Harry Potter series. Don't. Otherwise, you will be deeply scarred. The next book I read is actually a book that I have been keeping, like I was saving it because I knew this was going to be good and I wanted to get all the other books of the series. But I started it either way before having the books of the series, that is this one. I don't know if you can, if you're a reader, if you can understand this. If you could, then like comment underneath, say that you have got the series. And the series is The Throne of Glass. So Sarah J Maas is like one of my favorite fantasy writers. So, and I think I am slowly paving my way to get all the collection by her, and maybe I will try to get my hands on all the deluxe edition too, because all the deluxe edition looks so perfect. So yeah, this is a story that I loved. Selena Sardotian is queen, and this queen deserves all the love she gets. Like she is somebody you would be like, yes, she is there. Everybody is going to get killed, and I am not going to say the F word. You just put it in my sentence. Next book is Achieve Your Way. This is also another self-help book I got for review. This was good. This was also a very short book, and this also had, the best part of this book was than the previous one is this had every points written in points instead of long paragraphs of saying what you have to do, what you shouldn't do. It had written them on points, so it's like you open them, read them, got it, bye. It's like that. It would, I am, yeah, you can say by my style of review, I'm not a big fan of this kind of books. So yeah, the next book that I read was Akomov. So this was not a book that I read, but a book that I reread. So as I was reading the A Court of Silver Flames, I felt like I need to go back to Descent. Like I need to go back to Descent. So Descent is my fictional husband, and I felt like, oh, I was reading Cassian and everything, but I need Descent. So I just went ahead and read a 700-page book again instead of studying. So yes, that's how much I love fantasy books, and that was again amazing. And if you know, chapter 55. 11th book on my list is Ruin and Rising. So Ruin and Rising, this one actually I read hurriedly because it was in April, because in April Shadowbone trilogy was coming in Netflix, and I wanted to get done with the book, and I read it as fast as I could. I was actually reading, I have read that halfway through, so I again had to read the first half of the book and then went through the second half. The ending was good, and yeah, that was a good conclusion of the trilogy, I would say. The second book was meh, but the first and the third book was really good. I would suggest that if you're going into a trilogy, it is kind of expected that the second book is going to be a bridge between the first introduction and the conclusion. So second books are always but the third book was really good. It didn't let me down, and I was so sad about Darkling, but later on I wasn't that sad because I'm not going to give any spoiler about that also. So the 12th book on my list is You Bring the Distant Near. So You Bring the Distant Near is a story about this immigrant family, Indian family, who went to US, and how the first generation immigrants and the second generation immigrants were still trying to adapt the life over there, and how things are different because of their skin color. I wouldn't say there was in your face racism, but there was day to day kind of stereotypical behavior and prejudices they were facing, but also not from the outside world, but also in their own home, how they were coping up with their changes and the culture differences and everything. So this was such a nice story, and because the protagonists were Bengali, it felt much more homely. Like it was like you can read it and feel like, oh okay, yeah, I think these are the few things I can even understand and relate at my home, like the mother snagging and everything in between. The next book on my list is a series, actually I would say the three books: The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, I have it right here, and the Queen of Nothing. So this is a series that I self-gifted to me on my birthday. So this is a series that I bought, and I was expecting to read it somewhere later that year, but I was so anticipated that I picked the first book, and the second and third just followed. Like I didn't even I just went into this whole days mode where I didn't even know I was reading, but I was reading, and this was such a good story. Carden and Jude are the epitome of badass couple. So if you are a fantasy reader and want to read both male and the female protagonists are badasses, go for this book. This book is just amazing. So why am I saying book? Read this trilogy. These books are so amazing, and I think one of the like the best part of the story was the protagonist, main protagonist, the female protagonist didn't have any power. She was just a human in a fantasy world. Like this was so good, loved it. They are the characters you would feel so like morally debated, like whether to like them or not to like them. They are going to make you question things. So this was such a nice story. So if I would suggest go for this one. This is a very short trilogy. You will start and you won't even notice when did you finished it. And I am so sad what I read was again Crown of Midnight. So Crown of Midnight is actually the second book of the TOG series Throne of Glass. So in this one, Selena is now discovered about the magic, how it has went away from their place, and now she's no more just an assassin. She was now the king's champion, and everything is getting much more interesting because now magic was showing randomly, and she was trying her best to find out ways to get away from the king because the king is horrible. The king is horrible, so she is trying her best to get away from him and the castle. At the same time, she was trying her best to save Keol Westfall as well as Prince Dorian. So this is a great story. There is like a slight bit of love triangle that was in the first book, continued a little bit in the second book, but I think it is mostly Keol Westfall in the second book. And I know like why Sarah J. Maas gave us so many male options. Like who are we to choose? Who like all I read was Crooked Kingdom. So Crooked Kingdom is actually another book of the Shadowbone verse, so the Grisha verse. So this is the second book of Six of Crows. So I think if you have Netflix, if you haven't read the book, I think you must have heard. Like last year, it was all everything was talking about. So if you haven't heard it, then just go and watch the series. I can assure you there will be little bit of spoilers, but nothing major if you watch the first season. And if you watch the first season and you will decide to read the books, go in the order of reading the Shadowbone trilogy first and then read the Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Now Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, these two books not only has magic and everything, but it has a proper heist. The heist was so good. Like it is a book that is going to make you be like sit on your edge and think like, oh, what's going to happen next, what the characters gonna do, who is getting killed and why. It is such a great book. I don't think I'm doing any justice saying it in this such a long list. It should have another video. Like those two book deserves other video. So yeah, this is a very great book and I'm so grateful I read it. It was amazing. The next book on my list is The Palace of Illusion. The Palace of Illusion is a story like the story retelling of Mahabharata through the eyes of Draupadi. And this story was so well written. It now, if you have read Mahabharata and if you're Indian and if you're in CBSE, I'm pretty sure you have read that. But if you haven't, do read it. It is like such an amazing epic. Like it, why am I saying like so much? I love Mahabharata, and if anybody asks me what Indian literature they should read, I push them to read Mahabharata because it has politics, it has the moral judgment. It's going to take you the like the whole journey of truth and fair, unfair, justice, everything, and you will see how with each and every turns of event what has led to it. Like Krishna's time or the Gita is actually written from Krishna's Vani. So this was so good. Seeing this from Draupadi's viewpoint, this book was well written, and I would suggest If you have already read Mahabharata, give it a read. You will like it. I loved it. The next book I read is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. It's a long title. So this is a very short read, and this is actually a graphic novel. So this is actually a graphic novel, and it talks about little. It has small quotes and everything. So it's going to give you an overview of life. So it's something you can read it under 1 hour. It's such a small book, and why I'm saying 1 hour, because each page has like one line, max to max one line, and there are pages with no lines, just pictures drawn in them. So the next book is Air of Fire. So Air of Fire is the third book of the TOG series. Here Selena is now left for a journey to find her power more. She has crossed the ocean and now is in new land, and we get to meet Rowan. Rowan Whitethorn, amazing character. Now I am not going to say anything about this book because then there will be lots of spoilers, and if you are somebody who are going through this series and haven't reached the third book, I will spill spoiler, because without spoiler I cannot proceed about this review. I loved it, and I think this was much better than the first two books. So if you're on the second book, like, hustle through it. I know it's a fat book, hustle through it, you will reach there. The next book on my list is Chasing Tomorrow. So Chasing Tomorrow is Sidney Sheldon's book, and that it was all right. I had so much expectation from this book, and I cannot say I was met with those expectations. It was all right. It took me lots of time to read. This is not a book like I expected to breeze through this book, because Sidney Sheldon's books are so renowned. Everybody loves them. I don't know, somehow I didn't click with this book, and there are so many Sheldons left on my shelf. I'm not sure when I will be picking them up. Next book on my list is Prelude to a Riot. Prelude to a Riot is a book that I bought after seeing so many Instagram recommendations, and I am happy to say that I am not disappointed by that book. It talks about the political agendas of the people, and how the higher power people or the higher caste people often are putting their prejudices just to stay in power, or often how the racial injustice and the religious differences are brought up just for beneficial of 2 3 people who are sitting on top, but whereas the common people all are suffering. But this story, I so much loved it because it actually talks about so much of the current situation. I am not going to give a full review here, so I would say that if you're wanting to read a story that's going to have the political topic in them, especially the Indian political situation or the current things that are going all over there, I would say go and read it. This is a very thin book. You can read it under like a week. The next book on my list is Norwegian Wood. So yes, I must have one Murakami at least in my whole year of reading, and Norwegian Wood is a book that is loved by all. So I picked it up. I actually borrowed this from my best friend because she wasn't reading, and I beat her with that book and then took it from her, and I read it, and it was so good. And I think the something that I wasn't expecting in this book was the human psyche that goes through. I loved it so much. There was no magical realism as the other books that I have read by him. It was purely realistic, like purely in the very human world, and how people deals with everything. One of the thing I felt like I personally needed a little bit more information about was the suicides, like why they were all committing suicides. I really needed to know, but again, Murakami doesn't give you answer. He just give you the book and tell you to think. The next book on my list is King of Scars. So King of Scar is another book from the Grishaverse. So this is like new series that has started, and it has another book followed by it. And so I read this one and loved it. It took me a little bit time because here a new world is building. So it's not a total continuation of the first 5 books, but this is taking some pieces from there and building a new one. So I always think that any book series, the first book always takes time because it's the first world building, you get to know the characters, you get to know what is happening. So similar thing happened in the first half of this book, and the second half went amazing, and I cannot wait to read the second book. I am yet to get to that one. So this is a great book. I gave it like 5 stars or so. Yeah, if I remember correctly, this was also an amazing book. Go for it. The next book on my list is The Prince and the Dressmaker. So Prince and the Dressmaker is a graphic novel. Here the story is about the prince who likes to cross dress, and there's a girl who is a tailor, becomes the best friend of with this prince, and they slowly fall in love. And this was so amazing. They would sneak out of the palace, the prince getting dressed like a beautiful girl, and the story goes on. Loved it, and the ending was so good, so heartfelt. I would suggest go and read this. This is also a book that's going to take you under 1 or 2 hours, and the illustrations are amazing. Go for it. The next book is How the King of Elfen Learned to Hate Stories. So it's a big name. You can see all the other name and here King of Elfen. So this one is actually a novella from the King of Scars, not King of Scars, sorry, the Cruel Prince series. So this also has some beautiful drawings, and this is a book that you can easily read. If you have read the first three, then only read this one. Otherwise, you won't understand this book because it takes many character references from the main trilogy. This was also so good. Like I want so many more books from this series. Holly Black. If you are somehow in this video and made it this one, please make more books from with Jude and Carden. I need them. The next is The Namesake. The Namesake is a novel by Jhumpa Lahiri, and I don't think there are many people who haven't heard about this book. This was so good, so heartfelt. I think I cried by the end and I cried in between. It was so good. I cannot say enough about this book. And if you want, I can make the different review video on this one. I gave it a 5 star. If I could in books Goodreads, I would have given it 10 stars. The next is The Kiss Quotient. So Kiss Quotient is actually a rom-com kind of book with some steamy scenes, like the proper smut in it. So it was a very fast read, very addictive read, and I'm somebody who loves to watch rom-com movies and read smart. So yeah, this was a great read for me. The next is the No Exit. So No Exit is actually a crime thriller book. Loved it. It was full of suspense. It was about these 5 people who were stuck in this snowstorm, and a lady finds out that one of them is actually a kidnapper who has kidnapped a small girl and escaped hostage that girl in their van outside in the snow, and she tries to break free that girl while trying to find out who is the killer of the rest 4 who was standing there. So it was so good, like it was snowstorm, no one could escape, and the kidnapper is really gruesome. So, and she cannot trust anybody because all of them are strangers. So loved this book. It was keeping me on edge. It gave me so much anxiety, but it was so good, worth it. The next is actually Malibu Rising. So Malibu Rising is a book by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I love her books. I read the Daisy Jones. I have read something about the letters. I cannot remember the name. I have read Evelyn Hugo. Actually, that was the first book that I read. So I had to read Malibu Rising, and Malibu Rising did not let me down. It feels like I am into this life of this real socialites. Like this is like keeping up with Kardashians, but with these people. So Rivera's, yeah, Rivera, if I'm correct, reminding them rightly. So it was so good, loved it. All her, like I need more books by this lady. At this point, I would read anything she writes, even if she writes her name 10 times on a page, I would read it. The next book I read was A Silent Patient. So Silent Patient is actually a book, it's well talked about. It is a book, everybody loved it, and I loved it too. The twist in the end is all you need. Like I don't think the first few pages even matters, or it takes time if you are starting this book, because there are some diary notes, there is some characters, you are not sure who is talking, whose perspective it is, but by the time you reach like the 2/3 of the book, you know what is going on in, and that is the time you realize you cannot put this book down. This is so amazing, loved it, and I think I need more books like this. The next is The Unhoneymooners. Unhoneymooners is another rom-com with crazy smart and loved it. Go for it if you are somebody like me who loves to read smart. So if you are still here, if you're still watching this video, write down in the comment box below the Unhoneymooners. That's how I will know that you have reached till here. The next is The Duke and I. The Duke and I is actually the first book of the Bridgerton series that's on Netflix, and it is actually adapted from The Duke and I. This book was so good, and I was realizing while reading how much different the book is from the whole series. So amazing. I That's why I always love to read the books first and then watch the series or the movie, because they are more or less much more disappointing. The next is Hickory Dickory Dog by Agatha Christie. This book has let me down and I have talked about it in my previous video. I will put it in the I and in the description box, so go and check it out. And the last book is Spanish Love Deception. It is another rom-com with crazy smart. It was good, but kind of felt like I was rereading The Hating Game. See, there is so much office romance and some similarities, so it felt like I was reading The Hating Game again. But it was good no matter. So these are the books that I have read in 2021. I hope you find some books to read for yourself, some books to put it in your TBR. So yeah, I hope you liked it. These are my books, and soon I will be putting out other review videos, and let me know if any video you want me to review. And before going, don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. See you on the next part. Bye.